I'd like to call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the November 10th, 2025 meeting of the Town of Jamestown Planning Board. At this time, I'd like to remind everyone to please set their cell phones on silent. Roll call, please, Katie.
Yes, Darlene Fetty. Present. John Capes.
Here.
Hoping.
Present.
Robert Garland.
Present.
Brant Gomez.
Present.
Councilmember Burgess is present. A quorum is present.
Okay. May I please have the approval of the minutes for October 13th, 2025?
Motion to approve the minutes from October 13th, 2025.
Do I have a second?
Second.
to approve.
Okay.
Beat me to it.
The next item is a public hearing for the... Oh, I'm sorry. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Okay. The next item on a public hearing for the consideration of rezoning request for 207, 209, 301, and 305 West Main Street. I will now call Jose Colon to present the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Ng, and good evening, Planning Board and everybody from the public for the second rezoning of the year. This is case 2025-02, and I'm going to cover our staff report. I just want to remind the board tonight's hearing is for the Planning Board to consider whether the rezoning request is consistent with the town's comprehensive plan and whether it's reasonable in the public interest. No final decision will be made tonight, and your recommendation will go to Town Council. So the rezoning request is for the properties located at 207, 209, 301, and 305 West Main Street, which are parcels 160-256, 160-266, 160-265, and 160-261. The total acreage of the properties is measured in Guilford County GIS as 6.53 acres. The proposed rezoning would be to conditional zoning residential Main Street transitional. The current zonings of the properties are commercial Main Street transitional and Main Street. The proposed use is a multifamily development of 138 units. This is just an aerial image of the property assemblage. As you see, the property is in front of Potter Drive and Forestdale along West Main Street, which is an NCDOT road, and connected to Lennox Drive, which is a private road. Wanted to add some oblique imagery of the property as all directions, so you see kind of a view of the property from south, north, east to west. Also wanted to include a street view of the property from the furthest eastern corner. Right there you see the Fraser House, and then from the west corner right on Lennox. That is the street view of the site. Want to also go cover some land use facts on the property. The current use is currently vacant, and it does have the Fraser House. The Fraser House used to be a residential structure, but it has been used for commercial uses in the past. It is bordered by single-family residential and commercial Main Street transitional and Civic to the north across the street. To the south, there is single-family residential zoning across the railroad track. To the east, it is a zone Main Street, and to the west, it is residential Main Street transitional. The open space and tree conservation area requirements will be the following. The required open space is 1.584 acres approximately, and the tree conservation area will be 0.196 acres. In terms of street connectivity, it's connected to West Main Street and Lennox Drive, and did want to cover some historic facts on the property. It does include the Fraser House, but the Fraser House is not a contributing structure to the Jamestown Historic District, and that was confirmed by the state. And it was also the previous site of the Potter House. The requested zoning is, again, residential Main Street transitional, and it is a conditional zoning, so they do have a list of conditions that the applicant will present. The Residential Main Street Transitional District, RMST, provides for primarily infill residential development in the existing residential areas surrounding Main Street Periphery District and its logical extensions. The intent of this district is to allow for a gradual transformation of existing low-density single-family development to high-quality, medium-density residential development, as a higher density residential development is needed to support the growing town center. Higher density residential development allows for a greater number of households to walk and bike to the town center, thus reducing parking demands in the downtown and providing environmental and health benefits. Allowed building types in this district are detached house, attached house, civic building. Streets in the residential Main Street Transitional District should be interconnected, with streets and sidewalks providing connection from Jamestown's downtown to the single-family residential districts. A range of housing type is encouraged. These are the conditions for the site. I'm going to let the applicant go through the 13 conditions. This is very integral to what makes up the site. So Amanda Hodiern, the legal representative of the applicant, will go over those conditions. However, I do want to include a staff-requested conditional of approval. We heard a lot of concerns about potential traffic in this area, so this is just a process step to ensure that if it does go to council, they'll have the information available to fully address everyone's concerns. So I'll just read it out loud, and there is some potential changes to this just to make it a little bit more specific. Prior to town council consideration, the applicant shall submit a traffic impact analysis coordinated with the town and NCDOT. The study shall include evaluation of Jamestown Elementary School-related traffic during student drop-off and pickup periods, and we've heard that repeatedly during the community meeting, so we want to make sure we address that as part of the TIA. In addition to standard peak hours, so for TIAs, usually they look at peak hours. We're adding an additional request to really look into those times for pickup and drop-off. Findings and required mitigation shall be reviewed by the town and incorporated into the final plan as necessary. We might fine-tune a little bit of that conditional approval to include Potter and Forestdale Drives. Again, that was a concern, so the study can cover those areas. The completed TIA and any mitigation recommendations shall be provided to the planning board as an informational item before council review to give you all the opportunity to see the report and the impact analysis. As far as neighborhood meetings, we encourage neighborhood meetings for all the rezonings, and Berkeley Communities has hosted 2 meetings. Neighborhood meetings on September 30th and October 27th to gather input and concerns for the proposed development. Staff attended both of those meetings. Approximately, we had 12 people on the September 30th and about maybe 10 or 11 on the October 27th. And again, it was to gather input and concerns from the community regarding the development. This is the proposed concept plan for the multifamily project. Again, I'm going to let the applicant go over the details and the site elements with you all. I want to go over future land use of our comprehensive plan. So this request is interesting because it has 2 future land uses. So I'm going to read both. The western 2 lots are West Main Street. The West Main future land use classification is applied to the majority of land along West Main Street from the town center to the town's western border with High Point. This land use classification is intended to accommodate a wide variety of low to moderate intensity uses, including offices, civic uses, attached residential development, and small format retail along its traditional mixed use corridor. With the majority of the parcels in this area also located in the Jamestown's National Register Historic District, new development will be sensitive to the rich historic context of the area and utilize development styles that blend well with the unique character of West Main Street corridor. The second future land use designation on the eastern lots are town center, which are the following. The town center is focused on Jamestown's traditional downtown area extending along Main Street from Ragsdale Road to Guilford Road. The town center classification is intended to perpetuate the walkable, mixed-use development pattern in the core of town. This area serves as the economic, cultural, and civic heart of the community and includes a mix of businesses that cater to the community. Traditional development patterns in the town center have buildings constructed adjacent to the sidewalks to create an inviting atmosphere for pedestrians, while parking and service areas be located to the rear and sides of buildings. New development in the town center complements the traditional development pattern and architectural styles found in downtown Jamestown with masonry construction and buildings not exceeding 2 stories height above grade. I want to go over the guiding principles that support this particular request. Guiding principle 1, Jamestown will actively facilitate high-quality growth that is both compatible with the town's traditional development pattern and innovative in how it meets the needs for a diverse and dynamic community. and to ensure that infill development is compatible with surroundings from both use and aesthetic perspective. Guiding principle number 2, as the strength of our community is directly tied for the long-term success of our neighborhoods, we will work diligently to promote and maintain the quality of life and aesthetic standards that our residents expect in Jamestown. Also protecting established neighborhoods from encroachment by adjacent incompatible uses through the appropriate application of zoning regulations, and ensure that Jamestown residents have access to housing that is appropriate for all stages of life, family situations, including housing to allow older residents to age in place. And last but not least, guiding principle number 10, Jamestown is a welcome and inclusive community that values the benefits of diversity in all aspects of the town and its residents, and to promote the development and retention of a wide range of housing types that meet the needs of current and future residents of all ages, abilities, family compositions, and socioeconomic backgrounds. So again, the decision before you is conditional zoning residential Main Street transitional and appropriate zoning district to apply in this situation? Is the request consistent with the comprehensive plan? TRC has reviewed, our technical review committee has reviewed the request, and we feel it is consistent with the comp plan. However, again, staff will request that conditional of approval for the traffic impact analysis to be submitted prior to council. That concludes my presentation. I will hand it over to the applicant unless there's any immediate questions.
One quick question. So what you mentioned before as far as the TIA relative to Potter, so they would expand on looking at the traffic on Potter?
Potter and Forestdale, yeah, that was the
Okay,
request.
Okay, because that was, one of the things I was wondering was just, having had kids there, just the amount of traffic that's in that area, even though the school itself, I mean, I think we talked about this in our meeting, roughly 400 students, is that right? Plus or
About, yeah.
minus? Okay. So, I mean, that kind of puts it in perspective in terms of what the traffic flow pattern is going to look like. So I just want to make sure that was included. That was my only question. Thank you.
Are we sure what the impact on the local schools would be from 130?
We did submit a school impact report. We have not received it yet, but that's something new that I started doing moving forward. We're going to have school impact reports because that was some data that a council member had in the previous rezoning. So we made the request, we just haven't received the school impact report. So.
And just to clarify, a part of that, a part of the lot itself is part of the town center, is zoned town center?
The future land use is town center and Main Street, yes. So part of the lot is zoned Main Street and part of the lot is zoned commercial Main Street transitional.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing for you, sorry, Jose. Just from a historic perspective, typically when we ask about school impact and how things are going to relate to the schools, the end game is always going to be until it's built, they're not going to look at doing anything else on top of what's already there. So no matter if it's, 10 kids or 100 kids or however many, until they actually physically have them living in a structure that's right there, there will be no changes made. Now, this is something that is part of that's Guilford County, that's not us,
Correct.
just for the record, in case you're wondering. I just want to reiterate that because that has come up in other discussions in the past, so.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, sir.
All
Any other
right, thank-
questions? All right, I'm going to pass it to Amanda Hodiern, okay?
All right. Thank you, Jose. Thank you. I'll now call the applicant, Amanda Hudron, forward to present any additional information.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. My name is Amanda Hodiern. I'm here tonight as the attorney on behalf of the current property owners and the applicant, who is the contract purchaser, would-be developer, if this project is favorably recommended and proceeds forward in the process. My address is at 804 Green Valley Road, Suite 200, here in Greensboro. Before we get into the full specifics of our request, I did just briefly want to introduce my clients, the applicant clients, who would be the developer of this project if it is permitted to go forward, because of course that's who you as the town will be in a relationship with going forward. So I wanted you to hear from them. They're not a stranger to Jamestown. They're a very local, family-owned, closely held firm. Their offices are in Greensboro. They've got two existing projects here in Jamestown. One is the Courtyard Commons, which is just down the street from the subject property tonight. They've been on site there, didn't develop that project, but took it over, did a big value add reinvestment there to bring it up to their own standards and create a community there that they could be proud of, and liked that so much that they've been actively looking ever since for more ways to be involved in the Jamestown community, because it's been a community that matches well and lines up well with their standards as owner-operators for these types of residential communities. So they have been involved in Lenox Square. You all may be aware there's 2 new buildings going up in that project, which is also in the vicinity just next door to the subject property that we'll be discussing tonight. So again, that was done very intentionally because Berkeley Communities enjoys being a part of Jamestown, enjoys the type of community and residents that they have here in Jamestown, and they get a lot of requests and feedback for more. They have residents who enjoy living here, who enjoy being part of these communities, and so they want to be able to keep providing that. So I'm going to let you hear from Sterling Kelly briefly. Sterling and Stafford are here with me tonight, and they are the principals of that firm who, again, would be the owners and operators of this project. So I just want to give him about 60 seconds here. Thank you.
Delighted to be here before you tonight. Sterling Kelly, 422B, Fisher Park Circle in Greensboro. As Amanda has said, we really have a family-run business. We've been in business for 35 or 40 years, and as an owner-operator of quality communities that we build, either through acquisition and major renovation, as we did at Courtyard Commons here. That's been really a great success, and as an example of building a high-quality community. It was decidedly the opposite of that when we got involved in it. And we've spent over the years, we've learned that if you focus on people, the people who live there and the people who work there, you're in a great position to have a high-quality neighborhood or high-quality community. Our commitment in any community that we get involved in, any city or town that we get involved in, is to contribute positively to those areas, and the best way to do that is to deliver to the people who choose to live there what they're looking for. In the case of Jamestown, it's pretty extraordinary because I hear all of the residents of this community say what appeals to them is the small town living that's available here in Jamestown. It's precisely the reason that our residents at Courtyard Commons have populated that community and made it such a strong community. That's why they're here. I would just say we are looking forward to working with you and Town Council to making this property happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I wanted to first get started with a vicinity map overview here. Obviously, I know you all are familiar with the subject property. Mr. Colon did a great job with his staff report of orienting us, but I wanted to take a wider view here for a moment as we get started. So you see the red star there indicates the assemblage of the subject property. And what I want to look at here is where this subject property sits strategically in the scheme of the town of Jamestown. This is a really important site, I think, for you as a town as you think about some of the goals and objectives that you have for yourselves that we see and that we took note of as we looked at your Envision Jamestown comprehensive plan, your bike and ped plan, some of these long-range goals that you have. So as you'll note, it sits here right on West Main Street, just on the other side of Dillon and Ragsdale Road from your core downtown or town core, the part of Main Street where you have all of your downtown businesses and restaurants. Of course, Town Hall is located just at the top of the screen there where Guilford Road splits off. To the south, you have the train tracks traversing diagonally here. And then as you move further west, you have City Lake Park. Of course, that is technically a High Point facility, but very much an amenity of Jamestown. And then further going west, there's more official corporate limits of Jamestown property. You've got the Mendenhall Commons location that is coming online that's going to be a huge aspect of Jamestown. And so you start to see this corridor where people are already locating, where they already want to be. They come here to work, to play, to eat, to have entertainment, to have days at the park, to continue to visit the amenities that are growing at Jamestown Mendenhall Commons. You've got the library I didn't mention earlier, right across the street there at Ragsdale Road. You've got all the amenities downtown. You've got a school. So you've got all these aspects and attributes, things that people already like and things that already draw people into Jamestown. So we want to think about what adds to that vitality rather than detracts from it. How do we make good use of a piece of property here that is already in the mix of all those things and capturing all those people who already want to be a part of the vibrancy? How do we keep that going and add to the things that the town has told us is important through their comprehensive planning documents? So project considerations as we think about this very strategic and important location that very much, we believe, will have an impact on all those other things going on along this corridor. We wanted to be mindful of that. So we thought about the character of the area, of course. You heard Sterling say it. What they like about being in Jamestown, what their residents like, is Jamestown. It's the character, exactly as you think of that turn of phrase. It's not a legal phrase. It's what you all think of. It's why everyone likes Jamestown. It's that feel. It's how it feels when you come into downtown that makes you want to spend a day here. It makes you want to live here and enjoy the parks, enjoy the downtown restaurants, enjoy the library and the historic features. And how do we make sure that we, again, lean into that and not detract from it? We don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. Sterling and Stafford have learned through experience that leaning into it and capturing it, giving people a way to be a part of it, is what's successful, not trying to come in and do something different. Existing surrounding uses. So remember, we just looked at that, but we have some really key surrounding uses around us. We have an elementary school, we have the library, we have the historic commons that's developing to the west, we have the City Lake Park, and we have your downtown, the town core. We have all the single-family uses across the street, on Potter Street, on Forestdale Street, and we have some limited small-scale retail around Lenox Square. There's a Walgreens, there's a couple of car care facilities, and then we have an existing multifamily development in Lenox Square just to the immediate west, adjacent to the property. So just as you would expect in a town core, in the vibrant part of your city center, your town center, you've got a range of uses, a mix of uses. That's no accident. I think you heard that in the description that Mr. Cologne read, and that's how you would normally see. That's a preferred land use pattern when you look at a town core, because that's how you get that vitality, and that's how you capture and maximize on all those uses. Your adopted comprehensive plan, the Envision Jamestown plan, and your bicycle and pedestrian plan, both done in 2021. We looked at those documents to say, hey, obviously this is a key location. They've done their own thought process and envisioning about this location. What does the town see for itself in this area? So we read a lot about, we'll talk about future land use. You heard about that in the staff report, but bigger than that, just broader objectives. We heard a lot about infusing that town center, the downtown, the Main Street commercial corridor, infusing it with walkability, with vibrancy, with a range and a mix of uses to keep it, however you want to describe it, fully vibrant, vertically integrated, to have a full range of uses that touch all the different aspects of being in the town. So in other words, can you work there? Can you play there? Can you be entertained there? Can you live there? Because all of those things work together to create that vibrancy. We've all seen downtowns that look like ghost towns by 5:30 if there's no one there coming to the restaurants at night. That's not good for the business owners. It's not creating the type of downtown that I read about in your comprehensive plan. On the converse, we also don't want too much residential to where the businesses don't have enough of what they need. They need people who can walk there for lunch from the offices that are around. They want people that will come in and spend a Saturday, spend money, and then keep moving if they don't already live here. So there's a lot of boxes you need to check when you're in this kind of location. That's why that mix of uses, that vitality, hitting all those different aspects of development was so talked about in your comprehensive plan. So we wanted to make sure that we thought about that. We also read a lot about housing optionality. variety of housing. Obviously, Jamestown is a really desirable place to live. You all know that. That's been evidenced in multiple ways, time and time again, for years. So your comprehensive plan is certainly picking up on that and saying, hey, we want to not only make sure that we keep the people who already live here and want to continue living here by giving them the optionality to meet them where their needs are in terms of housing. And also, as new people look at us, we want to make sure that we have enough housing variety to be able to meet the needs of those folks who would like to be a part of our community, who could add to our community. However, the comprehensive plan also had a lot about our character, the feel of Jamestown, small town character, historic character. So while the town has these goals and vision for itself, it wants to do so under the banner of the things that you already like about Jamestown, that already work for us, not trying to reinvent anything and become something that isn't what you've already done a great job building here, but rather to build upon what already works and what you already like about the town. So we looked at all of that when we thought about this property and what would make sense. Proximity to downtown, we've talked about that, creating a land use that doesn't detract from it, doesn't compete from it, but actually props it up and works together with it to ensure the ongoing downtown vibrancy. We looked at existing zoning. We're going to look at that more in a moment. But how does the land use pattern already start to play out, and how can we fit into that in a way that makes sense, in a way that's compatible and harmonious? Again, we don't want to stick out like a sore thumb or create a huge deviation from what pattern we're already seeing. We looked at past development efforts on the property. This property has been vacant, but for the Fraser House for a long time. Some of you may know and remember there was a request for a drive-through fast food restaurant here, 12, 15 years ago, that was not successful, and that garnered a lot of public opinion and feedback that we were able to read and look back at those minutes and understand that, the thinking, at least at that time, was that drive-through fast food restaurants do not lean into that small town character, the feel of this corridor, that mix of uses that supports each other rather than detracts from each other. So we thought, okay, that's good to know. We need to be mindful of that feedback as we think about what we would do with this property. And then we looked at the Stafford and Sterling. Of course, they told you they've been here for about 15 years now in Jamestown. They're increasing their footprint here very intentionally, and they want to keep doing what works. They want to keep delivering what their residents like. And you heard it from Sterling, their residents like how Jamestown feels. They like that character. So they're using that experiential knowledge gained from already being a part of this community, Jamestown, but also this very specific West Main Street area. They want to build on that. They know what works. They know what their residents like. They know what they're 40 years in the business of being owner-operators of these smaller, more boutique-style communities, and they want to keep delivering that. They're not trying to make a big change here, and they know that Jamestown is a good fit, and they get the types of residents that enjoy it. Direct input and feedback from our community neighbors. That's why we wanted to hold more than one meeting, and we wanted those meetings to not be just here's what we've applied for, here's what it looks like, let us know what you think. The first meeting, we spent a lot of time saying, here was our starting point, we needed to get something on paper, but we really want to hear from you. So that, and we'll talk about that as we go through, but we really wanted to, I've told you all the factors we considered, but we wanted to get that out of our vacuum of our own thinking, put it out there to the community and say, are we on the right track here? Are you seeing what we're seeing? Is it important to you that this property has a relationship with downtown because it's so close? Is it important to you that there's a walkability and a streetscape feel here? Does it make sense to you that perhaps a residential use is the highest and best use here when we think about how a commercial use would look and operate? So we asked all those questions. We wanted to basically fact check ourselves and make sure we weren't in our own feedback loop without getting some outside input. And then we thought about, you've heard the word infill. Infill is when you're not expanding out and going to an outpost and annexing additional property, but rather you're already within the town core, the town corporate limits. You're surrounded by existing development and you're dropping into that. So we wanted to think about how do we make use of the existing investment that the town has here, your water, your sewer, your roadways, your nice brick sidewalks that are all around. How do we drop into that in a way that gives the town a return on that investment, but also that we make sure we're speaking to it and orienting to all those sides around us that already exist and are built out. So a lot to think about. So thank you for humoring me while we went through all that. But there was a lot of considerations because this site has a lot to offer. We feel like if it's done right, if it's done intentionally. So our project timeline since we've submitted to now, we've been on an evolution that you'll hear about, and so I wanted to kind of let you know how that looks. We initially submitted back in September, the filing date of September 12th. You think you heard about that in the staff report. The concept zoning plan looked different, the conditions were different, the data points were different, and that's because we wanted to just establish a starting point. We wanted to get the conversation started, we wanted to get this process started, so we had to submit something. We knew that we wanted to go for this residential, full-scale residential use as opposed to the commercial or commercial with a little bit of residential use that the property is already zoned. We'll talk about that more in a moment, but we wanted to go ahead and submit that residential establishment of a district and what it may look like, just as a starting point. From there, we held our first community meeting on September 30th, and as I've said, we really just wanted that meeting to be more about, you tell us if we're on the right path here, fact-checking ourselves, seeing if our considerations, maybe if not exactly agreed with, of course, we're at least in the right realm of thinking. What are we not thinking of that you need to tell us? What do we need to know that we haven't thought of? So that initial meeting, we had about, I think, 18 folks attend that, and we had a good discussion. We went through about 2 hours of, these are various types of residential community forms, a campus format, a grid format, an interior courtyard format. What do you like and what do you not like? Just tell us. We looked at about 8 different slide sequences of architectural treatments, thinking about how does design inform the land use? How does it help us bolster these considerations that we feel like, and we're hearing from you, are important? How do we make sure that we get that character of Jamestown? How do we make sure that we bolster and are compatible with all of the existing neighbors? So we got a lot of good input that night, and we walked away with the knowledge that, okay, we felt like we heard what the community definitely doesn't want, and what possibly could be acceptable or at least worth exploring. I'll say that. What could be worth exploring if it's done well? So I feel like it was a successful meeting, and that we got great feedback in those regards. We came back, worked on it for the next 3 weeks of October, incorporating that feedback. We have Luke Dickey here with Stimmel Design. He's our lead of our design team. He took all that pen to paper and incorporated that feedback, saying, okay, we don't like a big monolithic building up on the street. How do I get that worked into the plan? How do I make sure that Main Street still feels like Main Street? So we'll look at that in a moment. You can hear from him. He's here to talk about that as much as you guys would like. So we worked on that and came back and had a second community meeting on October 27th, where we had 3 new potential rezoning concept plans. And we said, okay, here's what we think we heard last meeting. Here's 3 potential manifestations of that feedback. What do you think? We also increased the mailing list for that second meeting. The first meeting had, I think, 68 recipients, and that was just using the town's required notification radius. As I said, we had 18 participants. In the second meeting, we said, let's try to get some more engagement. Let's hear more from the folks on Potter and Forestdale Street. Let's try to hear more from folks downtown. So we increased the notification range, and we actually had 167 letters go out for that second meeting. So we did do a quick review at the front of the meeting, just in case anybody missed the first meeting, and did a review, and then we looked at the 3 new plans. We actually had people get up and walk around, put stickers on what they liked, put black stickers on what they didn't like. Our team, and particularly Luke, circulated amongst that and engaged in dialogue to kind of draw out, okay, why'd you put that sticker there? What did you like about that? What didn't you like? What are your questions? And so we were able to get a lot of very micro specific detail, and we encouraged people to pick the plans apart. If you liked one aspect of this plan, but you didn't like the rest of it, tell us that. This can be mix and match. So we had another good meeting. I think we had about 16 participants that night, roughly. So again, not a huge attendance, but a very productive discussion with who was there, and I feel like we got a lot of good input and reaction to the 3 concept plans. So took that back to the drawing board, worked on it for the next week, and resubmitted a revised rezoning concept plan and list of conditions on October 31st, and that's what you see in your packet tonight. As you know, with conditional zoning is a more restrictive, more specific type of zoning that North Carolina law allows. It allows the applicant, at its voluntary option, to offer further commitments, restrictions, specifications to the zoning district that's being requested in order to curate and customize a zoning district and a zoning proposal that's more palatable to the community, to the decision makers, in order to be able to do all the things that you're tasked with doing, to ensure comprehensive plan consistency, to ensure reasonableness, and making sure that we're furthering all the goals of the comprehensive plan and your reasonable land use pattern. So that's how we use conditional zoning. It can always get more restrictive as the process goes along, but it can't go backwards. So the first plan we submitted had a maximum unit count of 161. You'll notice the second one that we've submitted goes more restrictive. It goes down to 138 as a maximum. The conditions, I think, originally were, 6 conditions? We've now gone to 11 conditions. So again, we're getting more restrictive as we go, more specific, more customized, which of course is what we expected would happen. That's why we had the community meetings. Again, the September submittal was just a starting point. So that conditional zoning is a platform for us to be able to take in that feedback and actually use it in a tangible way. So the nature of our request, now that we've done all that setup, the total project acreage based on the GIS parcels is 6.53 acres, so just over 6.5 acres. It's comprised of the 4 separate properties, 3 separate property owners that you saw in your packet and that Mr. Colon spoke about. Currently, it's zoned Main Street and Commercial Main Street. That's the zoning, the actual zoning district. We're requesting a conditional zoning, that's the CZ, that customized zoning for a residential Main Street. So while currently one of the parcels only allows commercial uses and the remainder of the parcels allow predominantly commercial with some residential, we're asking to what the planning textbook theory would call downzoning to a fully residential only type of use, and we'll look at that in the way of the conditions. It's a design-led project. We've talked about that. We'll talk about it more, and what we mean by that is, rather than saying, okay, here's the numbers, here's what has to happen, this is our prototypical building, we got to figure it out. Instead, we said, how do we design this well with intentionality to check all the boxes of those project considerations that we looked at, and then what does that tell us in terms of yield, in terms of the way it looks, in terms of the layout. So we wanted it very design-focused, and that's why we structured the community meetings the way that we did. And of course, the conditional request. I highlight that again because conditional zoning is a very useful tool in your toolbox to make sure that you are capturing the aspects that this applicant is offering that aren't already in your underlying zoning district. So it sits on top of the zoning. We're asking for that residential Main Street zoning. So all of those requirements and regulations that already live inside your zoning ordinance are already there, and then we're asking to put more regulations on top of that by way of these conditions. So it's a platform to customize and for us to be able to make commitments that you all know are enforceable and that will forever run with this dirt so that it will be developed in the way that this proposal says it will. So that's important. Zoning conditions run with the dirt. So regardless of whether this property owner can't make the project work, decides to sit on it for 10 years and then somebody else comes along and picks it up, these same zoning conditions would apply. So conditional zoning is a very important tool in your toolbox. Also wanted to highlight that we're at the rezoning stage, as you know, of course, And zoning is a very early step in a development process. And I always tell people zoning is permission to try. What do I mean by that? Zoning just sets the table. It's our tablecloth of regulatory regulations. All it does is tell us, what are the allowed uses? What are the dimensional requirements? What are the architectural requirements? What are the parameters and outer limits of what can be done here? It's not saying that exactly 138 units will get built. It's saying that no more than that can ever happen. So it's permission to try. So what that means is if this rezoning were to be approved, then Luke gets busy with his design team and engineers, and they have to put together an actual site plan that meets all of the requirements of the stormwater ordinance, of the underlying parking ratios, of the tree conservation requirements, street yard buffers, all of those things already apply and still apply. So those are applied to the zoning next, meaning that the extent of the development could get further curtailed, if that makes sense, because zoning doesn't give you permission to change or exceed or vary any of those pre-existing requirements. So you have to think about zoning as just the underlying tablecloth. What can we try? How can we attempt to move around the chess pieces? And then we come up with a plan that we believe meets those requirements, submit it to the review board. It's called your technical review committee. That's just exactly what it sounds like. It's a multidisciplined review by all of those experts employed here at the town, Guilford County, who handles your fire safety, your watershed, your storm drainage, the state of North Carolina, who handles all of the transportation improvements, the driveway permits. So all of that has to check off. So if that means that we end up not being able to get to 138 units, then that's what it means. So I just wanted to make sure we all understand that zoning is not a mandate. It's just permission to try, and then the development ordinance still applies. All right, so our existing zoning map, I talked about what an important consideration this is because this is your land use pattern, and we want to be mindful of this, right? We want to do something that drops into this existing framework. So you see the subject property here circled in yellow. Hopefully you can see on my legend here, I've also circled the correlating districts. You've got what I'll call dark purple is that Main Street district, and the light blue is your commercial Main Street. So that's the one parcel right there on the corner of Lenox Square Drive that is fully commercial right now. So it can only be commercial. So if you think about going west, you've got 2 car care establishments. You've got a Walgreens there on the corner. That's that zoning. It's that smaller scale retail. It would allow for, I'm sure Mr. Cologne can tell you, perhaps already has, it allows for a huge expanse of your commercial uses, not drive-throughs, but your other commercial retail uses that you see here in Jamestown would be allowed. Now, in your Main Street district, moving to the east, that darker purple, if you will, that's some commercial. Of course, we've got that to the east. You see that in the heating and air company that's adjacent to the site, the bait and tackle, the gas station, but it also allows for some residential. So it could go either way. It could be a split. It already allows for either of those possibilities. So the existing zoning already contemplates this somewhat intense range of uses that makes sense for this Main Street corridor that goes straight into your downtown. So it's consistent with the existing land uses that you see. That's why those land uses are there. Of course, across the street, the light yellow, that's your single-family residential. That's the homes across the street that you have on Potter and Forestdale. You have some institutional zoning across the street in the brown. That's where the school and the library are. And then, of course, to the west, you have that very light mint green. That is the Lenox Square multifamily development that already exists. That's the RMST you see just on the edge of the screen for that multifamily district. So we've got institutional, we've got commercial at multiple ranges and intensities. We've got residential, both in single-family and multifamily format, and we've even got industrial when we look across the railroad tracks. So this is very much a patchwork, a quilt of a lot of, a huge range of land uses. So what we want to do when we look at this is we want to be sensitive to that transition. We're coming out of the downtown, that's that dark purple, you know where all of your restaurants are, your retail in the downtown area, crossing over Ragsdale, Dillon, crossing into this more historic character, small town feel as we head west, and we want to think about how do we manage that transition. Is a full-scale commercial use the best way to do that, or do we want to start to step down with an intentional residential use that steps down and perhaps more intentionally interacts with those single-family residences across the street, with that institutional uses across the street, but is still mindful of the fact that there is a busy functioning railroad track behind this property, that there's already a multifamily community right next door to this property. So we wanted to drop into that framework. Your Envision Jamestown comprehensive plan, we talked about some of the broad goals with housing variety, with bolstering your downtown vibrancy, with creating walkability. But looking specifically at your future land use plan, you heard this in your staff report, we have a split on the subject property between Town Center, that's the brown, and West Main, that's the pink. And you heard your planner read out the descriptions of those districts. We focused a lot on those too. We wanted to make sure that we were consistent with those themes. Walkability, preserving the small town historic feel of the West Main area, and then the town center focusing on contributing to that range of uses, creating a mix of uses that all work together to bolster the overall goals of downtown rather than detract from it. So our rezoning sketch plan, what is it that we came up with when we took all of that into account? So this is the rezoning sketch plan that was resubmitted on October 31st, the result of that timeline that we walked through a moment ago. This is what's in your packets, and this is what we're asking you to consider tonight. So your rezoning sketch plan is, per your ordinance, this is required for all conditional zoning cases, and it is meant to be a tool to help visualize conditions. I've got 2 pages of conditions in front of you in narrative form, so your ordinance says, hey, why don't you go ahead and give us a way to help visualize that, rather than just pages and pages of written conditions. So that's what this plan seeks to do. It is not near as detailed as what a technical site plan will eventually be, when a technical review board has, the technical review committee comprised of all of your city, county, town, county, and state officials, all the engineers look at. This is not meant to be that. This is meant to be a graphic, visual representation of the actual zoning framework that we talked about. So what you see here is a representation of the zoning conditions that we're going to talk about and go through. Just a few things I want to call out, and in fact, maybe we'll look at the conditions first and then go backwards. So our proposed rezoning conditions. Again, remember, this is important because this is a further curtailment of the zoning district we've asked for. All of the other properties that are zoned with this zoning district don't have all these restrictions on it. Currently, the property is zoned without any of these restrictions on it. So uses shall be limited to all dwelling use typologies as enumerated in the permitted use table of your development ordinance and associated accessory uses of a residential community, such as club building, swimming pool, mail kiosk, and maintenance outbuilding. We worked with your staff to come up with that wording. Essentially, we're just saying that we are only going to do the residential uses. We wanted to keep it open to being able to introduce the other typologies, such as townhomes or duplexes, because again, this is a design-led project. We wanted the ability to follow where that design input led us, and if that meant doing some formats other than what you may think of when you traditionally think of multifamily, we wanted to have the flexibility to do that in our condition. Number 2, total number of dwelling units shall not exceed 138. That language is important, shall not exceed, because again, it's not a mandate. It's not saying that this current representation even shows 138. It's saying that we're committed that this will never go above that. It's giving you an outside ceiling that restricts what would otherwise be in place. We can't get to that unless we can do so under your development ordinance requirements. Number 3, there shall be an access point accommodating both ingress and egress to Lenox Square Drive. We'll look back. You see on the plan, currently we're showing access points both on Lenox Square. See if I can remember how to use the pointer. There we go. Lenox Square. And then we're also showing one here, but all of this is subject to NCDOT review. You heard a little bit about this from your staff presentation. We're doing a traffic impact analysis. That's not something that's required for every zoning, but we went ahead and have one of those underway. It's been scoped. The traffic counts are done. So that analysis is currently happening in NCDOT. Your town staff will review that, and that tells us it's a mandate, it's a dictation of what has to happen in terms of improvements and whether or not we get the driveway access points that our sketch plan is showing. So regardless, what this condition is saying is that we will have an access point off of Lenox Square Drive. And that's important because it allows us to make use of a 4-way intersection. And that gives NCDOT a lot of ability to tell us, hey, how do we improve that intersection and make sure that it functions to handle that traffic so that we're not dealing with it all along West Main Street. Currently, without a unified project, without a project that goes through this rezoning process, each one of those properties would be allowed its own driveway access point onto West Main. So we're saying, we're not going to ask for that. We're going to ask for a cohesive, unified ingress and egress plan. And importantly, we're going to do as much of it as we can off of Lenox Square. So this access point, there's not a condition about it because really that's up to NCDOT, what they tell us can or can't happen there. We've included it because we think it makes sense from a project circulation standpoint when we think about fire access, building circulation, getting in and out, emergency vehicles. It makes sense to have that those divergent access points, but again, that's fully up to NCDOT. Again, remember, zoning is just permission to try. So as we go through that process, if they say no, or it can only be egress only, or right in, right out, whatever they say is what we would have to live by. Number 4, subject to NCDOT review and approval, a crosswalk shall be installed from the subject property across West Main Street. Again, this is subject to NCDOT because this is their road, but this is a direct piece of input from our community meetings. We heard folks saying, yeah, we would like to walk into downtown and to the park, to these other places. So we'd like to be able to walk across the street and safely be able to do that. So we said, absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. Again, the comprehensive plan tells us that walkability, both from connectivity and a safety standpoint, is very important to the town. So if we're going to be providing sidewalks, providing this streetscape type of context that we're showing, then absolutely, we want to create that pedestrian connectivity in a way that's safe and makes sense. So we added that as a condition. So NCDOT will tell us where and how and if, but if they say yes, then that's something we wanted to commit and give that further specification of providing. Number 5, structures directly fronting along West Main Street shall be, quote, mansion or manor style structures. Mansion or manor style structures are designed to look like large single-family homes and include the following characteristics: a single perceived entry door on the front facade facing West Main Street, a single walkway connection from the front door entrance to the public sidewalk, and walk-up interior access. So that is speaking about these buildings here. You'll notice the small footprint. These are building typology roof lines that are available to Luke in CAD. So, all of them won't necessarily look like that. But the features, this is a definition from, you may have heard of missing middle housing. It's all about creating density in hidden ways, capturing density in ways that don't look dense, in ways that look built into an existing environment. It's a housing concept that's really made for I would submit this exact type of scenario when we're trying to drop in and be a puzzle piece to a framework that we want to be an asset to, be part of, not detract from. So that missing middle definition tells us that they need to look like single family. So, and Jamestown is a great candidate for that because all up and down West Main Street, you have this. You have these large-scale residential structures that could very easily contain multiple units in them on the interior, never to be known from the outside. So ways we control for that is that this single perceived front entrance. You know, single-family homes don't have 6 different doors on the front, right? We have one primary door. There may be a porch door or something of that nature, but there's a perceived single entrance. There's a perceived sidewalk from that entrance to the public sidewalk. And you don't have exterior, walk-up stairwells going to all the different units on these types of structures. That is a key feature to hide those multiple units on the inside. So that's how we fleshed out that definition. This was an important part of the redesign and the concept plan that's before you tonight because, again, this is a direct implementation of feedback we heard in those community meetings. Keep the small town feel. When we drive along West Main, we don't want it to feel like we're driving by a big apartment complex. We don't want it to feel like there's a big, monolithic building looming over us. We don't want to all of a sudden feel like there's this intrusion of, built facade into the area that we don't currently feel. So we wanted to provide for that. Also wanted to be able to, of course, capture the full residential purview of the type of project my clients are envisioning. So we said, okay, well, let's use that missing middle hidden density format to create three structures that feel like single family, that we can draw from the very real, tangible, physical evidence that we see all along this corridor and emulate that. The next condition, architectural style of the mansion manor style structures shall be, and I'm not an architect, so this is my terminology here, farmhouse or Dutch colonial or Quaker style, and those are 3 vernaculars that I drew to try and be representative of what we see when we look at those living examples all through Jamestown. We wanted to be able to replicate the Fraser House, the Ragsdale House that's across from the Methodist Church, other structures that we see, again, that would be in keeping with that character and feel that people already like. The primary siding material for mansion manor style structures shall be cementitious siding. That is that's the industry term. You may know it as hardy plank or hardy board. And what that means is that it's a higher grade building material that is used now to create that type of lateral siding that you see on farmhouses or the type of architectural treatments that we're looking to replicate here. So again, going above and beyond, giving that additional commitment for that higher grade building material. Number 8, there shall be no parking lots or surface parking in front of the mansion manor style structures adjacent to West Main Street. Parking shall be located behind. So you see that here, no parking. That's just, instead we wanted this to look like single family. We wanted it to look like what people are used to seeing in this corridor, and that's not big parking lots in front of houses, right? So we wanted to make sure and capture that with a zoning commitment. So you see all the parking is behind, not to the side, not in front. Number 9, building height shall be limited to 3 stories for the non-mansion manor style structures located in the interior of the subject property. So we've created this nomenclature for the project where the structures up here fronting the street are the mansion manor style. So anything back here would be non-mansion manor style, interior of the property. We set a 3-story limit because, again, we're dropping into this existing framework, and our next door neighbors are multifamily use that we have to tell us what is consistent, what's in the area is 3 stories. So we said that's what we need to match. We need to be consistent with that. There's again, consistency is the goal. So we wanted to match that. And also that directly delivered on some of the feedback we heard at the meeting, which was, we don't necessarily care about what's back there so long as we don't see it up on the road. We also heard we like Lenox Square because it does what it does back there and we don't see it. So again, we wanted to be consistent with that. Do what Lenox Square did, which was push that height and push that type of, perhaps more traditional, non-mansion style feel to the interior of the site where it's not oriented to the streetscape. Number 10, building height for the mansion manor style structures shall be limited to 3 stories, provided, however, that only the first and second stories shall appear to be full or standard stories, and any third story shall be designed in a manner consistent with a single-family residential story, such as but not limited to an attic style or a mansard style. So again, this was us putting into words what we see when we drove around and looked at these houses in Jamestown that were going to be our design basis. When we look at these existing farmhouses, the Ragsdale House, the Fraser House, they have a third story. It's not that. It's not a 3-story apartment building, right? It's more of a dormer windows or a gabled window. It's captured in a way that is consistent with a residential third story. And that's what we heard at our meeting. We like the buildings that we see when we look at these houses. We're okay with that kind of third story. We just don't want this big, multifamily, institutional feeling, monolithic third story on the streetscape. So we said, okay, let's capture that. Let's be as consistent as we can with, again, what we see in the area. And that wording is for that reason. Number 11, there shall be a hardscaped and planted plaza area located between 2 of the mansion manor style structures and adjacent to West Main Street, generally as illustrated on the rezoning sketch plan. So that's here. Again, that is meant to be consistent with that character. What does it feel like when we drive down this corridor today, and how can we lean into that and carry it forward? So you have a lot of these sort of pockets of breathability, areas where the public could perhaps take a break. If they're walking between downtown and home or the park, they can stop and sit on the bench and look at a piece of public art or look at the gazebo. There's a built-in focal point, if you will, that captures that sort of small-town feel. So just further expanding on that, same condition, that area will be directly accessible from the public sidewalk. You see that here, so that invites the public in. And it will include seating and either a fountain or public art installation or a gazebo focal feature. So we don't want it to just be, some benches and a patch of grass. We want it to be a design element and a focal feature that adds to the corridor, adds to the placemaking and sense of identity that we're trying to create here, and that we're trying to add to the identity that Jamestown already is successful with. Number 12, the positioning of the interior residential buildings shall form a courtyard within which there shall be a community clubhouse, community gathering area, and any swimming pool if applicable. The amenities shall be located, generally as shown on the rezoning sketch plan. So again, this is carrying forward feedback that we heard from our meeting. They liked, the folks we heard from and participated, liked the idea of a community courtyard gathering area, a way to advance and give opportunity for a sense of community for the people who live here. If you're going to have that, if you're going to foster that, you need a place for it to happen. We don't want everyone just hanging out on their, private balcony or porch or whatever it is. We want to create opportunity to get to know your neighbors. And we wanted to create a design focal point here. So a lot of what we heard at our meeting was that people liked the way this lined up. And so if you're hanging out in this focal feature and you look back, you don't see a big building monolith here. You see perhaps another gazebo that gives you a sort of a terminal continued vista as you look into the site plan. So that is intentionally stacked and lined up to give a view into the project that creates depth and gives more of a sense of dimension, so that you're not looking at these big buildings in ways that seem overbearing to the West Main Street corridor. Also, it creates an internalization of that activity. One of the things we heard was, it's great for anybody who wants to live there to have a nice community and things to do, but we don't want to hear it or necessarily see it, from our homes on Potter, which makes perfect sense. So that's another reason why we wanted to, internalize it to the interior of the site and, in the inside of the buildings rather than up here or elsewhere. Finally, our last condition, there shall be planting yards along the eastern and western property lines as indicated on the rezoning sketch plan. So this is in excess of what your development ordinance would already require, because again, we're considered like to like. This is 3-story multifamily next door to 3-story multifamily. Your ordinance doesn't require any buffering there. However, we said, we want to create a strong sense of community. We want to be in keeping with the development patterns we see. And currently, there's buffering. There's vegetated areas between developments. So we wanted to continue to provide that, even though your ordinance doesn't ask for that. Same over here. We wanted to be more mindful of this area. One, because there's a nice existing tree stand here. There's some good vegetation in this area. So we wanted to go ahead and say, hey, to the extent we can keep this, we want to keep it. And then we'll augment that to planting standards that are described in your ordinance so that your staff has a way to actually measure and enforce it to create that nice, separation between the uses, to create that visible screening, and just, it's a nicer sense of place for everyone, right? To see greenery when you look outside from your apartment or from our next door neighbors in their office building, rather than just seeing each other's ongoing use. Okay, thank you for helping us get through all that. That's the proposed zoning conditions we've just been through. Community outreach, we've been talking about this by and by. We did, this just showing you, hold 2 meetings, one on September 30th, one as an advancement of that conversation on October 27th. We increased the mailing list for that second meeting, trying to get more participation, get more input, because again, we wanted this to be a community-led, design-led project. So we went from 58 recipients to 167. That first meeting was focused on getting feedback. So we did show our starting point plan, but we really asked of the attendees, hey, we don't want to spend a lot of time on that starting point plan. It's really not important. It's not going to be what we ask for at the end of the day. We want to ask you, does residential make sense here? Are we right in thinking that it helps downtown, that it helps, create a sense of place, that it provides an opportunity to provide an infusion of residential into that mix of uses where you've already got restaurants, offices, retail. And then we asked about what land use form makes sense. How do you want the site to speak to and orient to the existing community? What type of architecture makes sense? Because again, we know from hearing it from you and we know from reading it in your comprehensive plan that small town feel, historic feel is important. So how do you think we capture that? So we talked a lot about that. So our second community meeting, again, we provided 3 potential options that we felt like, was an attempt from us to say, okay, here's what we heard. What do you think? Are we on the right track? And so we looked at those plans and got more specific feedback with the mind to creating a new revised plan that we could put forth before you tonight. And I also want to talk about the historic aspect a little bit more. Of course, we've talked about creating new development, new construction here that meets the ask from your comprehensive plan that says, hey, new construction needs to be mindful of the historic characteristics and feel and attributes of this corridor. We are meeting that standard by way of these architectural commitments that speak to that architectural vernacular and the land use commitment to create that mansion, single-family style along the West Main Street that is consistent with what we have today. But I do want to make special note that the existing structure on the house, we also want to be thoughtful about that, right? Of course, it's not a contributing structure, as you heard from your staff report, but it's still a part of the community that's important, and we wanted to be thoughtful about that. So fortunately, we have 2 property owners, the owner of the Fraser House and Mr. Will Ragsdale, who's very involved in the Jamestown Historical Society, who've been active participants with us in that goal. How do we use the Fraser House in a way that, it can continue to actually give back and be a historic asset to the community? Right now, it's a private structure. The public doesn't get to come in and out of it. it's not usable in any way that actually, can create any kind of experiential, historical contribution to the community. So we're looking at a plan now, and of course, my clients don't own the property yet, but we've said, yes, absolutely, whatever we need to do timing-wise to make this happen. And our underlying property owners have been very excited about this, to move that house down the road to that Mendenhall Commons area that is being put together as an event venue, as an actual accessible and usable historic community asset where people can come in and out of and actually interact with that house. Actually see, okay, this was a house from that era, here's what it looked like. You can come in on the inside of it, feel it, use it, and it can continue to contribute to the community in a way that it doesn't today and would not be able to under the current zoning, under what's allowed today, and would not be able to as part of this project. We did look at it. We did evaluate it to see if it was reusable as some sort of rehabbed home to be part of this. And unfortunately, it's just not. From a building code standpoint, what the code it was built to versus what would have to happen today for it to get a certificate of occupancy is just not feasible. So we wanted to look at, how can it contribute? And that's why we're excited about this plan to move it to a location that's intentionally creating a historic asset for the community. And then, of course, replicating that design integrity and that feel, that character in the new architecture and the format of the land use on the site. Okay. So the evolution of the plan, we talked about this from the timeline. We've talked about how we used our community meetings to move from our starting point to what we feel like is a better representation of all those project considerations that I read off at the top of my comments. This was our starting point. We knew from the beginning that we wanted to create, more of a village or a cluster type of land use format rather than one single building. But you can see we had a larger building up on the front. We had a bigger building in the back in that sort of angled building. And we, of course, had a higher ceiling in terms of number of units. These were the three concept plans we presented at the meeting. We looked at a design plan that had more of a townhome feel across the front. Again, wanting to be mindful of that feedback to keep it more consistent with what we already know along West Main Street. More residential, more small town characteristic. We don't want to see a big new building here that's of a scale and a scope that's not in keeping with what we normally see. So we thought, okay, townhomes may speak to that. We also looked at, these were detached garages in the back with a granny flat or a accessory dwelling unit on top of the garages. We did that to be in keeping with that housing variety, housing optionality goal that was so important with your comprehensive plan. And actually, a lot of people at the neighborhood meeting liked that. And there's nowhere in Jamestown that we have that. That's a pretty cool idea. But the interior buildings were pretty similar to what we had before. This next plan was by far the most, got the most positive feedback at our neighborhood meeting, and you'll probably notice it's the most similar to what's before you tonight. The mansion style in front, that town sort of public plaza seating space, the interior courtyard, small buildings. And then this plan, again, keeping with the mansion style, and we looked at doing a fully internalized interior structure in the rear or to the interior of the site that would really kind of centralize and be a single aspect to the interior treatment, if you will. The feedback we heard was, by and overwhelming that the mansion manor style along the front was the most Jamestown because it created that sense of single family that you'd be used to seeing already. People really liked the focal point plaza, the idea of no parking, and the idea that this would just drop in and be in keeping with what you could easily see there today, and pushing everything else to the interior, which is what people liked about Lenox Square. People didn't like the sort of monolithic or sense that this single building would create too big of a, the massing of it would seem too singular, too much of a single impact from one building. So we turned that into what's before you today, and I've just contextualized this. This is the same rezoning concept plan you saw a moment ago, same as what's in your packet, but I've dropped in the insets here from that night that we used at our meetings to sort of help people visualize what we're talking about when we say mansion style, when we look at these interior buildings. So mansion style, these are some examples here. These are all actual built examples that exist today. You can see it looks like a large single-family home. It has that single front door. It has a single access point down to the public street. It has no parking in front. It has any third story is, attic style, dormer window style. It's not a, standard full third story. So that's what those conditions are meant to commit. This is just a little vignette of that focal point that's going to be dropped in here to give that sense of breathability and placemaking addition to that corridor and front of the site that will be oriented to everyone who passes by. So meaning we wanted to be extremely thoughtful about how this community speaks to everyone else, not just those who live there when you pass by it every day. And then the interior, we wanted to break up that sense of, singularity. We wanted to keep that interior vista lined up so that you get that nice look through into the site without a large building kind of looming in. We wanted to keep that center courtyard, vibrancy for the community gathering that people liked. And this was one of the design inspirations that we looked at. So what we liked about this is that, again, yes, it's clearly not a single-family home, but it's got single-family features, dormer windows, gabled roofs. You've got roof variability. You've got a lot of window and porch overhang articulation. So you're getting that sense of, architectural vernacular that we heard was important. You're getting that sense of treatment that is compatible with the existing built environment. And you're also getting a nice, cohesive community because you've still got the same architectural vernaculars, but you're not getting, that campus feel where every single building looks the same. A lot of the feedback we heard in our meeting was that people liked sort of that village cluster is what we called it, type of land use form where, yes, it's a cohesive development, but the buildings, are compatible with each other, not identical to each other. That created more dimension and interest. So as we return to your analysis tonight and what we're asking you to consider, you heard it from your staff, you know this from your training, you have to look at what's consistent with your comprehensive plan and what's reasonable. How do you apply those two prongs of your analysis? So in conclusion, I want to re-emphasize our consistency with the Envision Jamestown Future Land Use Plan. You heard those in your staff presentation. That future land use plan, those objectives were to create a vibrant mix of uses all in that town core that propped each other up and made use of the existing population and people already visiting and working and living in the downtown so that all those uses can work together in a cohesive fashion. Walkability, pedestrian connectivity, bicycle connectivity. This project, of course, has to have a sidewalk built all along the front. That's a requirement of your development ordinance. We're gonna do the brick sidewalks because that's consistent with your downtown and with the feel and character of the community. So again, trying to pick up those little attributes wherever we can and deliver on those to further the objectives and the guidance that you've given us. We want to be here accepting the invitation that the town has set out, not asking you to embark on a new one. Envision Jamestown's guiding principles. You heard that from Mr. Colon, Principle 1, Principle 2, Principle 10. That was all about creating a diverse, vibrant downtown, a mix of uses that work together, creating housing optionality and diversity so that both existing residents and new residents can find what they need when they're drawn to Jamestown, and not create, something new and different that, is not already on the radar of a resident for Jamestown. Jamestown's comprehensive bicycle and pedestrian plan, again, you guys have already set the bar for connectivity and pedestrian bicycle movability. You want people to not have to get in the car if they want to go downtown, if they want to use this town's amenities. So again, by capturing some residential density and placing it in that corridor where people are already doing those things, you're giving people the opportunity to do just that. They can't be mobile on foot or by bike if they're too far away from the things they want to get to. Similarly, they can't do that if there's not infrastructure in place to do it. So this project says, okay, we're going to put a land use there that makes that, that captures that opportunity, and then we're going to plug it in with sidewalks, with crosswalks, with the features that make that actually doable. Return on investment for your utility infrastructure. You've got the water here, you've got the sewer here, you've got all of the comprehensive planning that you've done about your downtown, about your housing. We want to deliver on that. We want to bring a project that checks those boxes and actually makes those investments worthwhile, rather than asking you or asking the community to have to think about, how do we expand? How do we do more than what we're currently set up to do? We're saying, hey, you've done it. Let's give you some return on that effort and investment. A preferred land use pattern. Again, we looked at that zoning map. We looked at the surrounding uses. This is a puzzle piece. It has to drop in and be consistent with all of those things we looked at. So what you're looking for is a transitional use. How do we come out of downtown? How do we come towards that single family to the north along Potter and Forestdale, to the school, to the library, to the small scale retail and commercial and the multifamily on the south side? How do we drop in to that land use pattern in a way that makes sense for all of it? And a small scoped, very intentional residential community like this is exactly that type of transitional use from a planning standpoint. Use of a conditional zoning platform. Again, this is extremely important because we are further restricting, further customizing, further delivering a type of project that will check those boxes, that you don't have to take the chance, well, will it come in with those small scale structures? Will it come in with those focal points? Will it come in in a way that we feel like captures the character of the streetscape? We've committed to those attributes that we heard were important through the conditional zoning platform. Use of a traffic impact analysis. You heard this in your staff report. We heard the feedback that there's a concern, with or without this project, with or without what can already happen on this site, because remember, it's already zoned for some intensity of use. With or without any of that, there's a concern about, traffic congestion generated by the school. So we had already said, yes, we'll do a traffic impact analysis. We want to do that. Staff came back and said, will you also look at the trips as they integrate into the school time traffic? So let me explain that a little more. A traditional traffic study looks at what's called the AM peak, the morning peak, and the afternoon or evening peak. And that's what you think it is. It's when most people are making trips, leaving their house to go to work or wherever they're going to go, and then coming home at the peak hours of the morning and the afternoon. Those hours are 7 to 9 a.m., that's the AM peak, and these are industry standards for traffic engineers. The PM peak is 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., I believe. So the traffic study was already looking at all that. Staff said, can you look at the school as well? So we went back to our traffic engineers, said, we've gotten this feedback, there's a concern about how all this is going to work with the existing trips that are being generated by parents, people, teachers coming and going from the school. So we have increased the scope of our traffic analysis above and beyond what NCDOT told us to go ahead and look at 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. to capture the bell time of 7:15 in the morning for Jamestown Elementary. And in the evening, instead of just looking at the evening peak, we're studying from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., which ends up being 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. to capture that afternoon release time. And so what that will do, we're doing that at Lennox Drive, Forestdale. That's that intersection the commercial parcels are, and we're doing it at Potter Street intersection, because that's where we heard the concerns about queuing from carpool stacking and that sort of thing. So we are expanding our analysis to go back up, put the traffic counters in place, capture the existing data for what's happening in those hours, to make sure that when we look at our traffic generation and we look at necessary improvements or functionality considerations, that we're not looking at just the typical peaks, but we're considering the fact that in this location, there's a school peak, and it's different from those other hours. So we are doing that in keeping with what staff requested. And those, the analysis and the findings of that traffic report will be in time for town council, which was the directive we were given. Reliance on community input. That was another big feature of this. A lot of times, a lot of projects I've been involved with, you've probably had come before you. It's very much the applicant has something that needs to happen. And, you know, there might be some revision or massaging of that, but really it's, you know, this is how it works and we need to find a way to make it work. This project was the exact opposite. We submitted something simply to create a dialogue and to basically test our hypothesis, which was that a well-designed, intentional, thought-out, and meaningful residential use here could make sense if it's done the right way. So we submitted something to explore that hypothesis, and then we actively engaged and sought to flesh that out and make it better and add the attributes that would make it intentional, would make it capture the significant aspects that would allow it to deliver on those project considerations that we had identified and the community helped us identify as important. So I would submit to you that through the use of all of those different project tools and considerations over the last several months, that you have a project before you that is both consistent with your comprehensive planning guidance from a high objective standpoint, from a future land use standpoint. It's consistent with the existing land use pattern, and it is reasonable in that it is compatible and it speaks well, orients, and takes into account all of the considerations of the existing community and framework that need to be a part of this consideration. And you have technical expertise and guidance to help you fact check that. The traffic study, whatever mitigating improvements need to be made, turn lanes, chicanes, whatever it needs to be that NCDOT tells us, whatever needs to happen to that ingress egress point on West Main, that is how you ensure that those mitigations are in place to make sure that this stays consistent with the surrounding area and the use of the conditions that we've volunteered and that we have offered in order to try and capture those considerations. Thank you. I know that was a lot. I appreciate your attentiveness and your willingness to listen to all that. We've really enjoyed our community dialogue. My clients are really excited about this. You know, they set out to be a part of Jamestown and to lean into what has, you know, made this community one that they enjoy being in, not to change it. So we wanted to do that, and we feel excited about where we've gotten so far, and we look forward to your input tonight. As I've said, Luke Dickey from our design team is here for whatever questions or more eloquent explanation of our design features you'd like. And of course, Sterling and Stafford are here from any owner operational type of questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. At this time, I'll open the public hearings to anyone who would like to speak regarding the rezoning request. Please state your name and address for the record. Adhere to the 3-minute time limit. Please remember, this is not time for dialogue. The board is here to listen.
Hello, I'm Dr. Patricia Gray. My address is 105 Bellwood Court, Jamestown. I'm also the chair of the Board of Directors of the Deep River Riverkeeper. I will not take an hour and 15 minutes to talk with you tonight, but I do want to raise the questions regarding the watershed and the current situation with Jamestown's responsibility to the Randleman Reservoir. Quoting from some of the DEQ documents, Jamestown was audited by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, the Division of Energy, Mineral, and Land Resources on June 7th, 2023, to determine compliance with the municipal separate storm sewer system permit. And at that time, the program was found to be deficient in meeting all permit requirements. The renewal of the permit does not constitute an approval of the town's past administration of their program. The permit renewal and creation of the associated stormwater management plan is the first step of the town's process to bring their program into compliance with the permit. So we just heard in the policy guidance and balanced approach slide an item called return on investment of utilities. Has Jamestown actually made an investment in its stormwater system? Do you have a comprehensive stormwater management system that is recent and conforms to the Randleman Reservoir requirements? As you know, the upper part of the Randleman Reservoir system, in which we're sitting in, has the most stringent stormwater requirements. Therefore, when we start talking about increasing the stress on the current system that is out of compliance, the question becomes, are we really being responsible to the regulations and the people who have to live within this water system? So the stringency of development is serious, and this town is out of compliance, and the DEQ has the ability to really incur a lot of damage fine-wise. I will just add this piece. Quoting from the regulations of the Randleman Reservoir, new residential development shall not exceed 30% of the build-up area. That means of the 6.53 acres that is being proposed here, 1.95 acres would be able to be built on in compliance with the Randleman Reservoir regulations.
Thank you, thank you.
Hey, everybody. Susan Dickinson, 608 Havershire Drive. Okay, let's see here. About 3 years ago, hey, Rob, in January, I stood up here for the first time, and it was during the D.R. Horton development negotiations, and I spoke about the Randleman watershed rules. My concern was that our land ordinance had not been updated with the 2020 version. As Patricia said, we live in a very unique area. We have a lot of streams and tributaries that flow into Deep River and Bull Run, and they all meet up here, and then they go down a little bit further and empty into Randleman Reservoir and get piped back to us after it's cleaned and we drink it. But, and for that reason, in 2020, the North Carolina Assembly mandated a whole new set of water protection rules just for our tiny little watershed that still have not been updated in our land development ordinance. I'm not rendering an opinion either way on the development, but I am saying, man, it's time. We need to get this thing updated because this thing determines density. It allows us to enforce stricter erosion and sediment and construction runoff controls. It's the most important, these are the most important boxes that need to be checked before we check any more of the other boxes going forward, I would say. And that applies to any development in our town. So what I did, I spent all afternoon today, because you're going to hear the existing, it doesn't matter because the existing regulations are even more stringent and stricter than the new. Well, that's not true. I've got a big chart here I put together, and right before I left home, I went to my blog, thejamestowner9.com, and 9, by the way, is not for people. It's because when I registered my blog, that was the only number available. WordPress goes in order. I've just been asked that a lot lately. Go to thejamestowner9.com, and you can see a side-by-side comparison of the Randleman rules and the difference between the requirements and the protections in the 2020 rules that we need to have updated in our land development ordinance, and then what we have now. And there are things like incredible differences in the buffer protections. There's so many statutes referenced right now in our outdated version of the land development ordinance. Again, the watershed is the biggest section of this whole ordinance. You're using statutes that don't exist anymore, that expired, 10 years ago. Why are we okay with that? Your new zoning map is beautiful, by the way. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Katie Gummerson, 4648 Jamesford Drive. I am here to deliver some remarks from Sean Rogers, the former director of Mendenhall. He says that development must be avoided. It will negatively impact the historic and small town character of this community. What's next? Widening Main Street and threatening the existence of Richard Mendenhall Store or the Richard Mendenhall Hall? What happened to the idea that keeping Jamestown a quiet, quaint village? He also said, actions speak louder than words. What do you have to say to the stakeholders of our community? And in closing, he said, please note that we were talking about the property within the Jamestown National Register Historic District, and that is the Fraser House that contributes to that district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christina Reeser, 2621 Glass House Road. I'm here today because yet again another high-density development is being proposed within the town of Jamestown. What Berkeley Communities is proposing is not a good fit for Jamestown, and I'll explain why. In reading the application, applicant states, quote, as a multifamily community with no 3-bedroom units, the number of residents with school-age children will be de minimis, unquote. Considering the development will sit directly across from a very desirable elementary school, I find this statement to be misleading. Also, if the target is aging adults, who will want to live on a 2nd or 3rd-story apartment unless there are elevators installed? Per the zoning staff report, which states under special information that the watershed is, quote, Oakdale Reservoir General Watershed Area, GWA, unquote. However, when you look at HUC 12-030300030104, this number references a sub-watershed, which is part of the larger Randleman Lake watershed, a critical and protected watershed where 15 NCAC 02B rules apply. A highly experienced and trained planning department would have caught this error, but I'm sure the applicant was hoping y'all would miss it. As for the Randleman Lake watershed rules, these protections were mandated by the state legislature in 2020 and have never been incorporated into the town of Jamestown LDO, despite numerous requests by residents, ETJ, and community members. Once incorporated, the LDO language has to be submitted to the Environmental Management Commission, or EMC, for review and approval, a requirement under the Randleman Lake watershed regulations. And let me remind the Planning Board, these regulations should be enforced as the town of Jamestown falls entirely in the Randleman Lake watershed. I also want to bring up the fact that these properties are situated between City Lake, Bull Run, and Deep River. 305 West Main Street sits approximately 1,225 feet from City Lake and approximately 986 feet from Deep River, with SR 1334 to Oakdale Cotton Mill Dam being listed as a 303D impaired water. 207 and 301 West Main Street sits approximately 365 feet from Bull Run. 205, 207, and 301 West Main Street properties back to the railroad tracks, which poses an entirely different problem in terms of setbacks and noise pollution. Looking at the schematic of the development, a large amount of vegetation will be removed and the lot will be predominantly impervious surface. What issues will this development pose on Jamestown's current stormwater plan and issues? I do not see any retention ponds on the property, so where will the water go based on the large impermeable surface area? In closing, I would request the planning board take all I have stated into consideration. As representatives of the town of Jamestown, you have an obligation to residents, ETJ, and community members to uphold the LDO, state and federal laws, whether or not they're explicitly stated in town documents. I would also request an environmental study be done on this property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Rich Salyards. I live at 105 Potter Drive, within 500 feet of the proposed rezoning. And everything I understand, the sole decision process for rezoning this is based off of the Envision Comprehensive Plan from 2021. That said, according to what the staff came up with to send this on, to pass it through, impact analysis, if you will, it stated that parcel is cut, two parts of that are covered under town center. Town center, according to the Envision Comprehensive Plan, is nothing more than 2 stories. Well, we're already talking 3 stories. I don't understand why that's not a mic drop right there. It's over. It's a 3-story. No, you can't have 3-story, 2-story. Bypass that for a second, and several people have talked about the traffic impact that they're going to do with DOT. I contacted the DOT, and I got a report back already, and that report says that the intersection of Potter Drive and Forestdale has 8,960 cars a day past that intersection. On Main Street, Forestdale, Potter Drive. Now you're going to try to put 138 apartments there. That's roughly 260 cars. 260 cars leaving to go to work, coming home from work, going to the grocery store, visitors coming in, deliveries being dropped off. You're adding another 500 cars a day on top of 8,900 cars on an already highly congested road in front of a school. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's like, well, if the kids get across, they get across. People that live on that street, they get in their driveway, fine. They don't, too bad. Everybody knows that Forestdale and Potter Drive, and if you don't know, you come to my house and I'll show you, is a cut-through for everybody that comes through town already. And now you want to dump another 500-600 cars a day onto my street? I can't back out of my driveway without being scared to death. It doesn't make any sense. It's not the proper place for those apartments. It's a traffic safety issue. Also, if you look at the Jamestown Envision Comprehensive Plan, they did a survey on that. And if you look at page 18 inside the survey, inside the comprehension plan, the number 1 is maintain a small town feel. That was the number 1, everything everybody wanted. What was number 8? Out of 25, number 8 was no/limited to new multi-family housing. No. Page 18, it's right there. Everybody did the surveys. Everybody did all of that. We didn't want the apartments in. Not really interested in them at this point, especially at the end of my street. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers,
You got one coming?
I'll be quick, I promise. I'm Greg Pittman, 116 East Main Street. Just a little change of pace. Everybody think about our property values, Want to encourage the Berkeley Communities guys and team that Jamestown's special, so I love what you're doing with what I'm calling conscious construction. Just keep in mind that it's a special place, and as you do it, we would love for you to keep that at the heart of the project, which I think you've presented pretty well. But honestly, I want to encourage the board here to consider this with full fervor, because I can see the benefit as a business owner. The community would benefit from property values. Obviously, the tax revenue and all the other side benefits there for the town would be great. So, yeah, just a change of pace. Wanted to encourage it and say thank you guys for considering Jamestown as a new property site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Erica Bean Holtzman. I live at 110 Tangle Drive and on Woodmont Court, which is in Cedarwood and Wellington. I was a teacher for 22 years, okay? I don't know, your plan's really pretty, okay? But if you look at our schools, they're not so pretty. Florence, Millis Road, and Jamestown Elementary have a lot of trailers on them, a lot, and they're falling apart. I don't know where, if you're gonna have these multi-family place, and it's right across the street from the school, and you talk to DOT and the traffic patterns and all that, but if it's in walking distance to the school, you're gonna have to have a crosswalk. Where are these kids gonna go? More trailers? I mean, class sizes are already really full. Where are you gonna put more desks in there? I mean, teachers are leaving. They're not fighting to come in. I just don't know what where these kids are gonna go. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Paul, 102 Forestdale Drive. Yes, directly across from the proposed entrance of the subject property. I did attend both community meetings and even reached out to my neighbors that did not receive a letter. And it should be noted that the letter was sent pretty short notice for people that would consider maybe less than 2 weeks' notice, which is what it was. It was less than 2 weeks to attend those meetings. I am not in favor of the rezoning request. I am in favor of keeping the property zoned as commercial. I prefer to have a commercial business that adds value to the town and an opportunity for the residents to support. I am not in favor of the subject property due to increased traffic on my street, Forestdale Drive, and also increased traffic on Potter Drive and the impact that would have on the intersections of those roads onto Main Street. I'm in favor of keeping Jamestown small and the reason why I moved here a year ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Abby Lane. I'm at 103 Potter Drive, directly across from the elementary school. No one here knows the school traffic quite like me. Those parents are lining up at 6 a.m. and 12 o'clock when school is out at 2:20. And this really is the only place you see traffic in Jamestown. An additional thing no one has talked about, I live about 800 feet from the train tracks. With this nice tree buffer at the property, my windows are still shaking when the trains pass. And if you're wondering how many trains pass every day, it's an average of 32. At a maximum speed of 79 miles per hour, and every train is required to have a horn. I can't imagine living within that 100-foot buffer that they need to be from the train, and when that tree buffer is gone. We can all talk all day about preserving the charm of Jamestown. Could Jamestown benefit from apartments? Sure, but I can't think of a worse spot for it. Also, we talk about the town center. If you look at it, this is really the only place where the town center could expand to, which I would rather see. I think there's a happy medium between a Bojangles and 130 apartments, although I think the wooded land is the best option because we are a tree town anyway. 17 years strong, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no further speakers, I'll open the floor to the planning board for discussion. Board members, you may now discuss what you've heard from the staff and the applicant and the public.
I think she raised her hand. She wanted to say something real quick. Who? One second.
Amanda's saying she can respond to some of the questions
Yeah.
addressed, if that's okay, and
Okay.
then you guys can start your discussion.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Thank you. Real quick, going in order, and I apologize if I didn't get everyone's name correctly. We heard a lot of comments about the Randleman watershed and the DEQ rules. So I want to reemphasize, this is what I talked about when I said zoning is permission to try. It doesn't replace or negate any other required development regulations. So I agree with, actually, I think Susan Dickinson said, you know, the reverse of what she said. I'm not here to opine on the watershed rules because they are what they are, and whatever they are, the project will have to comply with. So the zoning is set, and then a project gets submitted for site plan review against all the required development regulations, watershed included. The project contemplates an underground retention facility. That's how stormwater is managed and treated and released in conformity with the regulations. But again, that gets reviewed and analyzed and determined whether or not it's legal at site plan TRC time. So this zoning, whether it's approved or not, would not have any bearing on what the watershed regulations are or are not, or if they're changing. So just to make that very clear, fortunately for us, that's not a decision we have to make tonight. And if the 30% rule or whatever else is in place with the correct watershed regulations, that's what will apply. So this zoning wouldn't undo any of that. Wanted to speak to the idea of trip generation. So our traffic study, the analysis isn't fully complete, but I do have the trip generation. It's 16 AM peak trips and, let's see, 16 AM peak, 50 PM peak in the morning. And then that's entering the site. Exiting the site, it's 50 in the AM peak and 30 in the PM peak. So, you know, I agree with Mr. Rich. I'm sorry, I didn't write your last name down correctly. You know, trip generation is important, and it is important to have those numbers, which is why we've done that data collection, why we're adding the school hours to that data collection, so that we can have a well-analyzed and give the experts the correct numbers to get the right analysis in place to tell us, okay, what do we need to do about any trip distribution going up Forestdale? So we do have actual counts. We will fold that in to the trip generation, and that will be part of the traffic impact study. So I think you know, he's correct to ask those questions, and we've agreed to ask them as well and get those answers. There was a comment about contributing structures. As you heard from Mr. Colon and the State Historic Preservation Office, the Fraser House is non-contributing, so that is an important distinction that has direct, you know, ramifications on how it is imputed into your comprehensive plan. However, we also agree that we want to be sensitive to it, and we want to find a way to keep it in a meaningful way, not just kind of sitting there. We want to be able to be participants in a proactive plan to move it to a contributing historical asset to the town where the community can engage with it, and we're committed to that. And we're also committed to keeping that historical architecture and vernacular in place, which is the stated requirement for new construction. Train noise, we have lots of development near train tracks, and you know, that's all a big part of housing diversity and optionality. What one person likes isn't necessarily what another person likes. So I think we have to be mindful of the fact that some people may have just moved here from New York City and enjoy the train noise. New construction standards are going to take into account that noise, and people living there will make that decision. There's no hiding that train track. So if that's a deal breaker for anyone, certainly it will be. She's right. Those folks will have the option to not choose this. She also made a great point about this is the only place for the town center to expand or downtown to expand. That's exactly right. And that's exactly why it's so important to think about how do we want to use this opportunity to fill in that framework and those objectives that the comprehensive plan tells us are important. It tells us a mix of uses that all support each other. The only use we don't have in downtown is residential. So if it doesn't go here, where will it go, and how will we check that final box of integrating all uses into downtown and creating that full integration of uses to create a fully vibrant town core? We heard about the comprehensive plan actually says no multifamily. So I think that was a survey answer, but the comprehensive plan uses that survey along with lots of other data points to come up with the goals and objectives. So the goals and objectives say we want housing optionality, and that housing optionality includes a diversity of housing that's all types. So there's not a prohibition in the comprehensive plan on multifamily. There is certainly a huge directive to maintain the feel of Jamestown, that small town character. So when we put those two things together, how do we deliver housing optionality? How do we deliver some limited multifamily in a way that meets those characteristics? You've heard enough from me about how we feel that this plan does that, and we're being very intentional to try and do that. School population is, of course, not part of the zoning analysis. However, because of the experiential knowledge of my clients, we know that 1- and 2-bedroom apartment units are generally not utilized by folks with kids, not saying they won't be. These are not age-targeted units. We heard that in some of the comments. They're not age-targeted. They're not meant to target an aging population. They're meant to target anyone who enjoys living in Jamestown, is part of Jamestown, and would appreciate this type of housing format. That said, just from an anecdotal standpoint, this is not a high generator of school-age children. Guilford County Schools does intake development data. I think, Mr. Capes, you were talking about this. They intake their development data into their planning for their school approach. So if this were to be approved, they would know about it from the moment it's approved. They would run it through their analysis and project how many students it would yield, and they would have that in their planning data for all the schools in this district going forward. But you're right, that doesn't happen unless it's actually approved. So that gives them about a 3-year horizon between when those children would actually be inside the school. Let's see. I want to emphasize this again because it was said in a slightly different way. The application making any kind of representation about what watershed subbasin this is in, that's not part of the zoning application. So wherever that data was retrieved or read was not submitted by the applicant. Again, and that's because zoning is not capable of undoing development regulations that exist for the state watershed. So the application makes no representation about the watershed and makes no proposal to amend it or abridge it. So the watershed is completely separate and apart from a zoning. Remember, zoning is permission to try. Then we go out and we see if we can meet all of those other development requirements and how those requirements overlay on top of the zoning to further inform what the site can actually be developed as. That's my list, but if you heard anything that I haven't addressed, please let me know, and we will answer that as well. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if you may indulge me just for a second. When our former interim town manager was here, Dave Dream, he said something that was very interesting. He said, "I'm the rumor control officer." And one of the things that he was charged with doing he felt, was to squelch rumors. And I'm going to take a page from Dave's rule book, and I'm going to squelch a rumor tonight. And I'm sorry that the people that said those information, they're no longer in the audience, but I'm sure that they'll get the message. With regards to the Randleman Reservoir watershed rules, This was a message from Sue Homewood, who is now retired, and this is from 2023. And she was squelching the rumor then. And it says, when the buffer rules were updated in 2020, the delegated and designated local governments in all buffered basins were informed that they were not required to update their ordinances, but rather they could if they chose to do so. The reason was that the updated buffer rules are less stringent than the prior rules. So if the local government chose to maintain the more stringent requirements, they would be exceeding the current state requirements and would satisfy the buffer delegation requirements. So the town has been in compliance, and in fact, we're more stringent. And I do believe that I would trust an employee from the North Carolina Division of Environment and Natural Resources rather than an opinion blog that has been posted. I'd encourage anybody that wants to reach out to me, please do so. I can put you in touch with our Public Services Director to help squelch some of those rumors that are out there, but thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, I'll open the floor to the planning board for discussion for the board members. You may discuss what you've heard from staff and applicant and the public.
I have a few questions for whoever from the company would like to answer them. So a couple things were brought up. You mentioned mixed of use, ROI. Some of the public comments were residential in downtown. When you were planning this particular development, at what point in time, or was there a point in time where you considered a mixed-use space? The comp plan was mentioned several times this evening, and given the location of this lot close to downtown, going away from downtown, in my opinion, a mixed-use space where you're adding in commercial restaurants, you're adding in office space with the ability to have residential above that would be far more useful for the town of Jamestown and the growth in 10, 15, 20, 30 years than 138 apartment units in prime real estate. Can anyone from the company talk about that?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your question. So we did look at that, and we actually had a perfect example right next door with the Lenox Square development. It's developed in exactly that framework that you're talking about, where you've got residential in the back, and you've got the 4 out parcels, if you count the undeveloped parcel in the front, that is all commercial. So when we think about mixed use, I think we often want to think about a vertical mixed use, but in markets where you don't have a certain threshold of population density, you don't get vertical mixed use. You often get that horizontal mixed use on a site. And we saw that that's exactly what happened next door. That's how this property was kind of already zoned. So we did look at that. We thought, okay, do we want to replicate that and then see what residential we can get in the remaining area? And again, our theory of the property and best use was that already exists. We've got that next door. It's great to have Walgreens. It's great to have a place to go get a new air conditioner filter for the car. But what do we not have down here in the town core area? And it's a critical mass of residential. So certainly, I love that. I love that conversation topic, and I think it's certainly a reasonable divergence of opinion. But yeah, we looked at that, and we felt like the best way that we could further the goals and objectives was to continue the pattern of horizontal mixed use looked at holistically when you look at the town core, rather than a directive that you need to meet mixed use finitely on each individual site, because we don't have the ingredients that tell us that would be necessarily successful here, or that it would infuse the downtown with that other land use that's currently missing from the fabric.
So you mentioned population density. So, did you take into consideration the D.R. Horton property that's coming in that's going to be adding a huge portion of population to the town of Jamestown? On top of that, you mentioned that vertical use doesn't have, or you believe doesn't have the ground for maybe today's standards. What I'm looking for, and my question really here is, I've got a 7-month-old daughter at home, and I'd like to see Jamestown be something that she can grow into in regards to multiple places to go. And I think when you're looking at downtown, on top of what the benefits to the town itself are with tax revenue that's far greater in a mixed-use space compared to a standard residential complex like this, I would view that the tax revenue to the town under the guise of a mixed-use space would be far more beneficial for the people of Jamestown compared to 138 residential apartments.
Oh, well, since you brought it up, tax revenue is actually highest from multifamily. So we can, I think ultimately, though, to talk about land use and to talk about how do we look at things that the future of Jamestown can utilize and incorporate into their experience here, if they want to have the same enjoyable experience that, caused them to grow up here, I'm not debating that mixed use wouldn't be great. It would. But I'm saying, how do we employ the resources that we have available? So when we looked at that, to answer your initial question, yes, we did look at that, and we looked at the fact that we have a finite amount of land here, a finite amount of downtown left, so how can we best try and deliver a project that would create a lot of revenue for the town and would create a lot of opportunity for the future of the town, looking at ways that people who grew up here could maybe still get to live here or return here, or people could stay in the community as their housing needs changed. The downtown has, it's a great thing that the downtown already has a lot of great commercial establishments to visit, and those establishments hit a lot of different age varieties. But we wanted to say, okay, when we look at the new commercial development that's coming in, we can draw some conclusions from the newest members of your downtown commercial mix. And we know that that's retail and commercial is driven on rooftops and who's nearby to inform that and to keep that business afloat. So we just took all those data points and, again, I think it's a great discussion and a thing to look at, but this particular applicant landed on, we want to add to the mix of uses in the horizontal pattern that's already been established and infuse that with the residential use that's missing from that framework today.
So I mean, I can understand that, where you're coming from on there. And as a resident and also business owner of Jamestown, who lives in downtown, as well as works in downtown, it's something that I think Jamestown needs is the ability to expand its commercial space. And so a vertical mixed-use space, I think, once again, it's my opinion, would be far better and more beneficial to the town of Jamestown than, like I said, 138 apartment built units. But thank you for your answers.
Yeah, thank you for your question and that feedback.
I've got a couple of design questions. I don't keep putting you on the spot there, so.
Let Luke, weigh in.
They've been getting a break the whole time, so get one of them up there. So, how you doing?
Very well.
Good.
Just for the record, my name is Luke Dickey with Stimmel Associates, 601 North Trade Street, Suite 200, Winston, North Carolina.
Thank you, Luke. Good to meet you. So one of the things that has been of primary concern for me, my children have gone through the elementary school and the entire school system here. They're grown now. But honestly, the struggle of Potter Drive, Forestdale, that entire area has, continued. It's just been what it's been, essentially. So when I look at your design, I'm just wanting to qualify a few things. I note that there is an ingress-egress point that is purposely, I'm assuming, not lining right up with Potter. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. It is offset.
Okay. And I know it's left to the DOT, but whether or not that ends up being exclusively right in, right out, or something like that would have to come back based on the traffic study and what they would allow us to do. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. The primary entrance to this entire development is coming in off of Lennox. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And one of the things that will end up being I guess, part of the TIA would be, looking at the intersection at Forestdale Drive and East Main Street to see how that's going to be taken in and impacted. And forgive me, I'm kind of talking through that question, but I think it's kind of a given. The East Lennox Road, I've been over there, I get car parts, I've got cars falling apart all over the place. So, I mean, I've been over there many times. There's a good serviceable road right there that is, you know, I am wondering a little bit, I mean, so from the Main Street point of view, if they go with the mansion style, which, by the way, I applaud the effort, that is, you want something that is going to be very, I have good eye appeal, but at the same time, not necessarily be the standard, you know, run-of-the-mill, whatever you're going to see. But is there going to be some additional signage? I wasn't sure what the signage was going to look like on Lennox to draw people, that's the entrance to get into this thing. Is that?
Yeah, so for when the details get into for when the actual proposed plan is, you know, where the signage gets located, yeah, you know, on that corner at Lennox would be a main project sign that would be located at a location outside the site easements. That would be required from there. That could direct people into this location here. So that would be more emphasized. Obviously, a four-way intersection is more emphasized as a main entrance as it would be a single drive off to the side. We can look at when we get into the details of, you know, the other entrance that we have off of Main Street. You know, do we make that a little bit more narrow so it doesn't look like it's a large, it's more meant for really for an exit movement or, again, emergency access from that point. In regards to kind of what was mentioned in Amanda's presentation was, again, you know, we have separate parcels right now that front onto Main Street. If they were developed individually, then they would obviously get their own driveway cut onto Main Street. So when we were looking at it, where can we consolidate our drive locations? We had an existing drive there at Lennox, which is a four-way intersection. That will be analyzed to see what we need to do from a mitigation standpoint for the traffic, whether that's additional turn lanes, looking at the storage tapers and everything else in that location. The other one that we proposed, again, that's to the east, we made sure we offset that from Potter so that the left turn movements don't conflict with each other.
Right.
If we had put it on the other side of Potter, then further to the west, then that would conflict from that standpoint. So then you don't have conflicting turn movements, which would cause further issues for that site. But yeah, as we go into those permitting requirements, then that would be looked at a lot further from that standpoint.
Yeah, I was trying to follow the logic as far as what you'd done with the entrances and how that impacted Potter. I mean, the biggest thing that's going to come up time and again, and I've been around enough years when it comes to town management that anything we want to do with the school system is predicated upon Guilford County or, you know, at a state level, depending on what it is. And there is not, unless you go directly to Guilford County Board of Education, for example, and start knocking on their doors, there is nothing other than what we're already doing that can be done to help impact the school system. Now, obviously, there are things from I don't think anybody's going to be widening any roads, so I mean, that's a whole different conversation. But one thing that stands out to me also is that the way this is laid out, is there going to be, I mean, from a foliage standpoint, is there still going to be a railroad buffer of some kind going back into that area? I wasn't sure about that.
As we get to, we don't have a full survey
Sure.
at this point, you know, so
Hypothetically,
we don't
I
have
guess.
GIS stuff. So as we get some more details of what the topography is going to be actually on site, you know, we're just making some assumptions at this point. You know, there's some limited stuff that we can do within that railroad right-of-way in terms of what we can do from a grading standpoint and drainage and stuff like that, that we've gotten some feedback from the railway. So as, again, plans get developed a little bit further, that'll be looked at whether that foliage would be there for that. So that, again, that foliage would more or less protect our development that we're proposing than it would anybody from Main Street or across the way.
Right.
I mean, kind of one of the things.
It would be mutually
noise is
beneficial.
We're now putting building solid structures up there, which will actually help hopefully mitigate the noise from the tracks.
Right.
For those out in front as well.
Gotcha. I've got one more for you, but real quick. Jose, correct me if I'm wrong. As far as the way it's set up in you know, downtown Jamestown, the three-story rule as it relates to roof height versus three actual stories, and I've got a piece of it in my head, but I can't remember exactly what it was in terms of what the standard was, what the rule was. Matthew, you may be able to help me on this. Does it ring a bell? If it doesn't, it's fine.
Yeah, so our ordinance has a maximum building height, for sure, but one of the things that was referenced in the comp plan is the preference for 2 stories, and we want to make sure that the comp plan is a guiding document. It is not, you know, a hard rule. Our land development ordinance has those rules, and there is a height requirement for those.
Gotcha. Okay, and I just, basically what we're talking about with the mansion style is a higher roof with the design being that if there's anything else in there, it's more of a loft, you know, almost For me, it always comes back to being a game room, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, so it could, like your conversion of an attic space with dormer windows that give you that extra space up there, so they would be a little bit smaller units.
Okay.
Unless you go with more of a mansard type roof kind of concept, you know, with the dormer windows on that, that gives you a little bit more height with that type of aspect. But again, the thought would be you'd have your full 2 stories
Right.
that are going to be looked at for the 2 levels, but the third level would be integrated into the roof structure so that it minimizes its overall height. So you're not doing 3 full stories with another pitched roof on top of that, which increases the height
Right,
even further.
and that's where we ran into the problem with the 3 stories, because then there's a roof on top of that, and we had an issue, it's been 10, 12 years back where this came up as a discussion point. That's all I've got, guys. I have other things I'd like to say to y'all, but I don't want to suck all the air out of the room, so if y'all have got questions.
Well, I have a question, and I'm not sure if you would be the person to answer it, but just curious, what's the marketing demographic of who you guys are marketing these apartments to, and what are the price points?
Sterling, would you like to manage that one?
I'll let Stafford or Sterling talk about just kind of the resident profile that they've noticed from being here in Jamestown. We can't talk about pricing at a zoning hearing, of course, but, you know, I think that you can extrapolate from the very high-quality development that you're seeing. You know, we have to, the economic pro forma has to support the cost of construction. So you can, you know, you can draw your conclusions as you should from there that, you know, the level that you build to informs, you know, how you're able to make that happen in terms of your financial pro forma, if you will. Stafford or Sterling, you know, they certainly know who their Jamestown residents are and who comes and looks at these apartments, so I'll let him speak to that.
There's not a type of resident that we've had over the years at Courtyard Commons. It's really a wide range of financial means. It's a wide range of employment. You get teachers, you get policemen, you get doctors, you get a little bit of everything. And it's part of what, in our view, is part of what really makes for an interesting community to be a part of. And especially one, as I said earlier, that's in a small town setting. That's the reason people have sought out Courtyard Commons to live. I hope that answers the question.
We are a bedroom community, so. I
Yeah.
said, we are a bedroom community of sorts, so,
Yeah.
I mean, there's that.
Yeah.
Stafford Kelly, work with my dad right here. Well, we're 1515 in West Cornwallis and Greensboro. But no, these apartments are designed to attract a wide range of folks from different occupations. The term we use is it's more attainable housing. These aren't super luxury apartments. These will be nicely designed, well-appointed apartments that a wide range of folks will be able to live in. It's ones and twos, as you've heard earlier. And it's based on what the people who have lived at Courtyard Commons have shown us to appreciate. They're part of the fabric of this society, this town, and we intend to replicate that. It will be a slightly higher price point than Courtyard Commons right now, but so we have a nice range of folks who can have multiple housing options as they consider living in this community.
What is your mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms?
The mix of it, like the percentage-wise,
Yeah, the number of units each.
right now where it's
and
about
twos.
50-50, it may skew to 45 ones, 55 twos, but it's pretty close to 50-50. We've found over time that units have, well, it's just reversed during COVID, but people started going towards smaller units, so higher.
I was just going to add, the unit mix is also informed by all these other development regulations that we've talked about. So as we start to look at, how can things fit and work out and still meet all the required elements, that might inform, oh, we need more one-bedrooms, or, the attic style third floor obviously are not likely to be 2 bedrooms, that sort of thing. So that mix spread, keeping that flexible, allows us to have some play in making sure that all the other requirements, we have some ability to meet that and still keep some play in the project.
That's correct. And the kind of the shift back towards maybe more 2 bedrooms is a result of a lot of folks working from home, hybrid schedules. People prefer offices. So it's not necessarily 2 people are going to be living in there. It could be 1 with an office. So it's an interesting concept, and there's plenty of literature out there for folks to look at. But that's
I have a couple more design questions, so I bet you can answer them. One of our guiding principles is aging in place. And am I correct, some of the conversation, these will not have elevators?
not currently, no.
All right. What about your first-story units? Will they be walk-in? If somebody in a wheelchair, as an example, they can go right into your one-story, or your first-floor
Yes, ma'am.
units, rather?
It will be ADA compliant.
Okay, and then the other question I had, your ingress, egress, or any of those of either roads, are you planning to have a gated community there, any controlled access?
Most of the gates I see are all broken.
Yeah, bingo. And they hold up traffic, so that's the reason I asked that question.
Yeah, that's correct. No, we are not planning on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I got one question on the traffic impact analysis. With Lenox Square and the 2 plots that could potentially be developed on, is that also part of this development, of this analysis that the NCDOT is going to do?
It is, and staff can corroborate this. When they have the scoping meeting, the traffic engineers, it's Davenport Engineering that my clients have hired, they sit down with the town and with NCDOT, and they agree on, all the, what's called the ambient or background traffic. And so staff will tell the engineers, hey, you may not know about this, but this many units are approved there. So not only that, but whatever else is in the scoping area will, yes, be brought into that analysis. They also tell us what intersections we have to study. Thank you.
As for parking, you were gonna, oh, yeah.
Go ahead,
You
go ahead.
Go for it, go for it.
Okay.
As for parking, so you mentioned for the 3 manor-style homes that the parking would be in the rear. Is this going to be set up as parking on like just one side of the street with the other side meant for through traffic, or how is that going to be set up?
I want to understand your question. Do you mean West Main Street?
No, I'm talking about behind the manor-style homes. You said the
Oh.
parking was going to be behind here, correct?
So
how's,
it's a surface lot. I'll let Luke speak more, but it's a traditional surface parking area in the
Okay.
rear. But if that doesn't answer your question.
Yeah, so if you look at the concept sketch, there's the parking stalls would actually face on the backside of the building, and then there's the drive aisle, and then there's another parking stall on the west side for that other building. So yes, it's a drive aisle with parking on either side on a portion of it, and then only parking on one side of that. And then we get in the U-shaped building then had the parking goes around that, and there's parking on both sides of the drive aisle there. And of course, then we'd obviously meet the required standards for the town in regards to what the parking requirements are. So when 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, the minimum is basically equates to 1 space per unit. And then when it comes to, there's a maximum as well, and the calculations basically come out to 2 spaces per unit maximum that would be required. So right now, that sketch shows, if we had 138 units, we'd have to have a minimum of 138 spaces. Then it'd be 276 would be the maximum that we could have. That sketch represents just over 200 spaces at this point. So it's kind of that in that middle point there.
okay, thank you.
So with that question about that, so that's counting the residents. What if they have guests?
Well, again, I guess, if the minimum is 138, so if you only had provided 138, the guests would have, if you have 208, I have 70 spaces technically for guests, if you have one car per per unit. So again, we're in that middle of kind of what's meeting what the code requirements are. So we're not the minimum and we're not the maximum from that standpoint. So again, you're always going to have a mix. You don't know exactly what's going to be designated for guests because, somebody may rent a 2-bedroom apartment, but then maybe only, again, one person, so you only have one car in that location. You could have 2 cars for a 1-bedroom. So, we really don't know what that mix is going to be. We just got to follow what the code requirements are in terms of parking.
What is the occupancy rate of the other 2 complexes that you guys have on average?
There's one right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Courtyard Commons, and it's 95%.
95, okay.
Yeah, and really stays at that level.
Okay.
Over time. You'll have dips and spikes, but.
Okay, thank you.
So, I don't want to cut anybody off if they have any other questions, but I did have a few thoughts for the board, if that's okay. So a couple of things have, come up that I find interesting. So one of which is, the effort to try to pull these 4 properties together in the first place to do something with them. Aside from Turntable, which was here a dozen or so years ago, which I tried very hard to be a supporter of, there's been really nothing that has happened. But the thing I find interesting about this, you always hear about, which is understandable, you hear about density, how many people are going into this, what are we looking at as far as impact to the community and things like that. But what's interesting about this footprint is that very little of it is actually street view. In other words, we see a concerted effort for something that is upscale, clearly. They're going straight for hardy board, which is a very good building material right off the bat, but it doesn't have like this whole let's have it all the way down the road type of approach to it. It's much more of a, we got this and it goes back like that. And if you look at it from that standpoint, in many situations when we talk about, additional residents and bringing people in to have a place to live, that's about as good as it gets in terms of that footprint. I totally agree with Rob's point on having additional mixed use, but I think if we look at the corridor itself, I think somebody made a comment about an environmental study. Realistically, we need to, and this goes back to our government system, this is not a planning board thing, this is a council thing, this is a local government thing, about, let's take a study of where our town is at right now, where are the mixed-use opportunities, where do we need to revisit, where do we need to go and actually try to pull this stuff together and make more sense out of it. So, and also I applaud the extra homework that you did on it, because I did some more work on it afterwards. I was like, this is good, but I think in the interest of where we're going with this, when you look at, first off, Berkeley property, for whatever reason, I've been involved on a couple of occasions now, both on council and here, when it comes to development. I remember when Courtyard Commons was a hellhole, okay? It looked like, Watts after the riots. There was one building that was burnt down. There was a lot of junk in the back of the parking lot. There was a lot of stuff going on. And, at the time, we did not know this developer any better than we did anybody else. But they said, we're going to make it better, and they did. Okay? And then subsequently, not too long ago, we talked about Lennox Square. We've already had that conversation. But I think one of the things we have to take into consideration now is that we actually have proof of concept. We don't have an arbitrary, this ain't the pre-D.R. Horton days, thank God, okay? We actually have somebody who's already come in and done stuff, and they've done it with a very good amount of earnestness and been very forthright in terms of the things they've said, and they've done the things that they said. And all you have to do is go look. I did several times over. When we talk about the comprehensive plan, that's another thing that honestly, we're probably going to start crawling up on something where we need to start looking at that again too, as far as what does that look like and how does it tie back into what you were talking about before. But I think, as we try to pull all this stuff back together, the Randleman Reservoir and all that, I'm not saying any of it is not valid. It's just simply not something that we deal with here at this planning board for this issue. It has nothing to do with anything.
Correct.
Okay? I appreciate the points. I wish they would go to our state and federal government and talk to them, because they're the ones that really set up all this stuff that we have to comply with. Moot point, moving on. So the other thing that stands out to me, and I promise I will shut up real soon, is that, you know, when we look at our tax base, okay, there's been a lot of talk in recent history. We just had an election. They were talking about increased taxes. If we're ever going to bring the tax rate back down, we have to have more, we either have to have more people, we have to have something else that expands on that, either the residential density or one hell of a business, okay? And this speaks to that and at least gives our council members the opportunity to have that discussion at some point down the pipe. You know, it creates the type of momentum that would allow them to say, hey, you know what, guys? This year, how about if we lower taxes 1 cent, or well, whatever. But I mean, the only way that happens is if stuff like this is allowed to at least, you know, get up to the council and let them have a look at it, okay? So I'm not trying to overly speechify this thing. I just wanted to kind of get all that out there for y'all to consider, because our responsibility is simply this. Do we feel comfortable enough to say we should push this onto the council? They're the ones that have to make the final decisions. They're going to ask 20 billion other questions on top of anything that we've said, and they're going to have hearings and do all that stuff again. And now we've kind of gone through and done the preliminary, the dress rehearsal, if you will, but they're the ones that will be on stage to try to figure that stuff out.
Correct.
Does anybody disagree with that or feel differently?
About
I
the,
agree with you, John. One thing I think we should consider as far as our applicant, we have somebody who's not only the developer, but the owner, and will be the managing agent, the operator as well. So it's not someone sweeping in to do it,
Right.
and then they're gone. So
They're skin in the game.
that's important.
and I don't know if this is talking about this, but with all the development that's happening in Jamestown, I've only been here 5 years. Lots has happened in 5 years since I've been here. You've been on town council. Has there been a time within that decade or so that actually taxes have gone down due to there being more property developed?
Well, here's the thing. For 5+ years, the tax rate, and I was on the council the entire time, by the way, we don't get credit for that, but the tax rate was untouched. It was untouched. It did not go up. We discussed it. We did everything we could not to do anything about it. In terms of raising it for any reasons, we stayed the course, and we stayed true to it. And then when, you know, post-COVID, everything hits the fan's on high, and all the prices double. Everything's going up, and we still have deliverables if we're going to maintain the assets of Jamestown. If we're going to maintain just what we have, then the taxes have to go up. That was part of the game. Then we have pass-through, which is coming from High Point, which is, you know, our water bill. We own 7-8% of our water. So if they say, hey, guess what, you got to pay more money, we got to pay more money.
Right.
We don't control it. So the only opportunities we have to leverage something along these lines is to do something that creates that opportunity. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but at least it gives that dialogue a chance to get some lift in it, if that makes sense.
It does. It's just most places I ever lived, coming from Florida as well, where everything's being developed, I've yet to see any taxes ever go down.
That's a fair point. This is a very unusual town, and in regards to stuff like
Population
that.
goes up, but the taxes keep going up.
I could see it. We really are still a small town, okay? And we have a small town feel. We have a whole lot of things about this town that make us great. And that's one of the things, is we have a great local council, town manager relationship, and that's what builds on that, and that's what makes all this work. And so I could see that happening here. I'm not just spinning that out there for kicks. I promise you I'm not. But, you know, I've been in local government, so take that with a grain of salt. Anyway.
I appreciate your input.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I did not mean to go off on a rant there.
May I have a motion to recommend approval or denial of the rezoning request for 207, 209, 301, and 305 West Main Street from Main Street and Commercial Main Street transitional to conditional zoning residential Main Street transitional?
I'll make that motion that the proposed zoning amendment be approved. Do I go ahead and read Not yet. Or just make the motion?
Yeah,
Just
recommend approval.
I recommend approval.
I'll second.
All right.
I have a motion to adopt the statement of consistency.
Madam Chair,
Or-
I'm going to do a roll call. Darlene Fetty? Aye. John Capes?
Yes.
Robert Garland?
Nay.
Brent Gomez?
No.
Madam Chair?
I'm going to vote no.
The motion fails. So at this time, you can recommend denial, or you can continue the public hearing. It's up to you.
How about continue a public hearing?
Do you think that having additional information will help you make a recommendation?
Yes.
So I'll need a motion to continue the public hearing to the December 8th Planning Board meeting at 6 PM in the council chambers without further advertisement.
Make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Yes, third.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
If there's no further business, may I have the motion to adjourn the
Well,
meeting?
one second, and just want to mention, this is other business. Our variance hearing for Wednesday has been canceled. The applicant wants to reschedule when we have a full board. And then I think it would just be helpful for the applicant to get an idea of what additional information they should come in December. That way, typically when we do a continuance, we want a reason. Not because we don't want to make a decision now, but from the, I guess, board members who did say nay, what additional information you would like from the applicant. Thank you.
Personally, I would like to see some more of those studies. Hopefully, they can come back by then. And I would like to just do some additional research on my own.
Yeah, additional studies and what the DOT final report is.
I agree. I want to see some more information before I make a more of a decision, yes or no as well.
I want to make sure we bring you the studies that you're looking for. So I hear you on the TIA. That makes sense. Was there other particular studies?
No, I just have a hard time with the self-cautious, like keeping a small town and adding 138 units to Jamestown and still call it a small town, and cutting down more trees and being a tree city.
If there's no further business, may I have the motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?